What's up? This is Everybody Settle Down. I am Charlie Marlow. That is the great Eric Messersmith. And before we started, Eric, we said the theme of this is going to be Joe Biden. Should he stay or should he go? Then we thought of the song. We didn't remember who sang it. We thought maybe it was the Ramones. No, people are yelling at us. It's the Clash. It's the Clash. There you go. Should he stay or should he go? Joe Biden. What do you think? And hello, Eric. How are you?
Hello. He should go. We talked about that Friday, the day after the debate. And look, I've been a guy who has said there was no great option with an 81-year-old incumbent president. But I thought the Dems' best bet was to do two things. If Biden really wanted to run, and clearly he and his team did, let him try to see if he could make the case. I didn't know if he could or not. State of the Union looked good. Other things have looked bad. I was like, well, we'll see. But if he can't, if it becomes clear at any point between now and say late July, which is probably the cutoff time, then he's got to go. And I think Thursday night changed everything. I think it showed you that he can't do it, or at least is very, very unlikely to be able to do it. I never say never in politics, especially with these two men in this year. But I think it showed you it's very unlikely that he can do it. He's certainly he was an underdog coming into that debate. He's a massive underdog now. The polling post debate has not been good. And so he should go. The real question is, will he? And I think we are in that kind of precarious position where that is, I think, likely to happen, but it's far from a certainty because Biden is telling people that he wants to try to hold on. He's having a meeting tonight, as we're later tonight, Wednesday night, with the Democratic governors from around the country. He's talked to officials. He's doing an interview with George Stephanopoulos Friday on ABC. He's doing a campaign rally in Wisconsin this weekend. So they have a press conference they're going to do next week. So they're trying, but I don't think that at the end of the day, I do not think it's going to work. And in fact, the betting odds dropped. Biden entering the debate was roughly 35%, dropped to 20% almost immediately, and held in that range for several days. And then between yesterday and today, Biden plummeted down to about 9, and Kamala Harris, who had been at 10, went up to about 20. So they essentially switched places. Biden was about 20%, Kamala 10. Betting markets reversed that. Now, in the last few hours, it's moved back a little bit toward Biden. Right now, this is electionbettingodds.com. Their aggregate of betting markets have Kamala at 17.1%, Biden at 12.5. So Biden's narrowed it a little bit. He's gotten kind of like a dead cat bounce, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I think the writing is on the wall. Lloyd Doggett, congressman from Texas, came out yesterday and said Biden should step aside. He was the first elected Democrat. There's been a bunch of reporting that there are, from various outlets, that behind the scenes, Democrats in the House and the Senate and other influential Democrats around the country are essentially ready to come out and make a public statement. Joe Manchin, who is no longer a Democrat, but was a longtime Democratic senator from West Virginia. Now he's an independent. Apparently, he was going to go on the Sunday shows and call for Biden to not be to step aside, and was talked out of it by Democratic senators. So you can see momentum is building for it. And at this point, I think the writing is pretty much on the wall, but Biden has the delegates and nobody can force him to give those up. They are pledged to him at the convention, which means unless he chooses to step aside, he will be the nominee.
And to me, there's a big difference about what people are saying publicly and what people actually think should happen. Now, as you mentioned, there are already some people who are saying this publicly, and a lot of media folks have said this publicly. I guess what I'm trying to say is anybody coming out with a tweet or anything on the campaign trail in support of Joe Biden right now, in my opinion, Eric, is a lie. Like, do you think people really support Joe Biden and want him to run? I'm talking about the Democratic apparatus. I'm talking about campaign folks, surrogates, media types, elected officials. It's okay because, look, we have this July 4th holiday. I think it's the perfect time. with July 4th falling on a Thursday, I mean, you really have a 4 or 5 day weekend for a lot of people. It's kind of the perfect time to really set this in motion. Maybe it leaks out over the weekend. Maybe there's an announcement Monday. I mean, hell, maybe it doesn't happen. But my point is, anybody who's coming out with a tweet or saying something in support of Biden, it's not true. I understand kind of standing by your man until they figure out the mechanics of actually doing this, but no one believes, I think. I don't think anyone really thinks that Joe Biden at this point give the Democrats the best chance of winning. And we can get into the polling later, but I still think that if you put almost any warm body in place of Joe Biden, just somebody who's, let's say, 55 years old, I think that person wins. I think that person gives the Democrats a much better shot because, why do you like Joe Biden? Don't you think you like him because, okay, he's a Democrat, he's been around for a while, but if you basically say, we're just going to give you a younger version of Joe Biden or maybe a female version of Joe Biden, whatever. I think if you like the Democrat agenda, which half the country does, let's be honest. If you like the Democrat agenda, why wouldn't you want a younger, more energetic version of that? Right?
There's two theories because I agree with you. These Democrats, I've seen some of them on TV trying to spin this, and the spinning is laughable. I mean, we all know what we saw. You just can't spin that. I don't want to hear he had a cold or it was just a bad night, or because if that was a bad night, then we can't allow a man who has bad nights like that to be president for 4 more years, maybe not even 4 more months. But also, I've heard that, Biden has been telling people apparently he had jet lag from the 2 trips back to back he took to Europe over a short period of time. Come on. He had 7 days at Camp David. Like, these excuses, I agree with you, are hollow. I agree with you. The people saying them don't really believe them. So there's really two ways to spin that. You could say they're just cowardly, which I think there's a lot of truth to that, and they are afraid for their own political futures. You could also say they're being strategic if you were being generous to them. And you could say what they're doing, they know what we know, they know what everybody knows. They want the same result that we think should happen, you and I and many other pundits. But because they're elected officials, they think if they pile on now, we know Joe Biden is stubborn. I mean, you saw the rally Friday, the day after the debate, where he said, I know I had a bad night. I know I wasn't good. I know I'm not the same guy, but I've been knocked down before and I get back up and fight. And he, look, in Joe Biden's life and career, he's had tragedy, he's had setback personally, politically, and he does. That's how he views himself, and there's a lot of truth to that. But this time is different, and I think they know that. But I think they think if they came out forcefully right now, that may have the reverse effect, and it may dig him in rather than letting it play out and letting bad polling come out, which we're starting to see, maybe some bad fundraising, which we may see, maybe another slip up. We'll see it with the Stephanopoulos interview, letting it play out. And then you still get the result you want, or you have a better chance of getting the result you want, rather than come out and do what I think is the obvious thing and call for him to step aside. And then maybe he digs in and you don't get that. So that's part of it. It's also the true definition of a collective action problem. Because if you're a Democrat, and you come out on a limb ahead of everybody else, and then let's say Biden doesn't step aside, or let's say he does and you lose, and now that's hung around your neck that you were the guy, you were Brutus, you knifed Julius Caesar, like you were the guy or girl that did that. What does that do for your political career if things don't work out? There was a good article in Politico where it talked about the strategy of these governors, because we've talked about this before, there's a half dozen of the Democratic governors around the country right now who, if this thing opened up, would jump in a heartbeat. And according to this Politico story, governors and their aides also said they were in the same holding pattern, feeling no choice but to publicly defend Biden, but privately furious at the president and his inner circle. Yet there was a broad recognition they were constrained by their ambition, that if one of them urged the president, even in private, to step aside, they'd be outed and portrayed as trying to take their shot, as one advisor to a Democratic governor put it. And that's essentially where we are. They're all waiting because they're either cowardly or strategic or both, depending on how you look at it. And I think that's okay for now. Like, to me, the point is Biden leaves and somebody
Yes.
else emerges, and you have time. I would like to see at least the Democratic conventions in mid-August. They're going to do a conference call prior to that because of Ohio has a ballot deadline. And so to get their nominee on the Ohio ballot, they have to do it a little earlier, but you still have a month. So to me, the it's not urgent he do it now. It's just urgent that he do it. And so I'm okay waiting a few more days, go to him privately. And then if that doesn't work as a last resort, I think the Democrats have to get together. And I think they will. I think that this is what you will see if the polling continues to look bad. You will see, if Biden won't leave, big name Democrats from the House, Senate, governorships coming out probably together. So they all take that leap at once and nobody's out on a limb by themselves, publicly calling for it.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, in terms of getting knocked down and getting back up again, which I believe they played that song on his Friday rally in North Carolina.
I
I
think it was
either
Tom
saw
Petty. I think it was I Won't Back Down, Tom Petty.
okay, okay, so I wasn't sure if they played it actually at the rally or if somebody put it over a video on social media, but he said something, Biden said something like, it's not about getting knocked down, it's about getting up again." And then somebody played the Chumbawamba, "I get knocked down." You know, this is now a musical themed show with the Clash
It
and all
really
that.
is.
But look, even if you say, "Oh, he didn't look that bad the next day," it doesn't matter, right? It's
No.
over. I'm sorry. It's over, Joe. It's over. It's over for the Democrats if Joe runs. And then also some of the spin after that. You mentioned the jet lag, which I think those trips were 2 weeks prior. We were making fun of him for being at Camp David for almost a week before the debate. You're at Camp David for a week and you still have a bad debate. By the way, there was a picture where it looked like Joe Biden got spray tanned. And I was watching Fox News last night. Gutfeld, they did a whole deal on it. It looked okay. Go back to debate. Joe Biden looked old and very pale and frail. And then 2, 3 days later, he's got this spray tan, trying to make him look younger. There was a picture out of him talking, I think, about weather and climate that was put out today. And he's right in the middle. There's a bunch of people in a desk that's kind of the shape of a U. And it's like, here's our strong leader. He's running the meeting. You can just tell all of this. They're just trying to clean up the mess that happened last Thursday at the debate, which I think, and I thought this the whole time, by the way. I never wanted Joe Biden to run for a second term. I thought when he said a bridge 4 years ago that meant one term. I guess it didn't, but I never wanted Joe Biden to run. For a while there, I said, okay, maybe he's still their best chance of winning. I I don't know. I don't think that. And again, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube after Thursday. It's just over. I'm sorry. Like nothing he does from here on out will erase that from people's brains. It's
No.
indelible.
Well, in the spin of also talking about prior presidents running for reelection who had bad first debates, Obama famously in 2012, Bush in 2004, of course, both went on to win, but neither one of them were 81 years old. Both of them could put together defenses for their record, although with Bush, it was sometimes a bit of a struggle. It was a completely different scenario. Also, they weren't both behind. That's the other thing to remember. Biden didn't have a lead to sit on and a cushion. He was behind entering that debate. And he's even further behind now. And that's the point is what are the odds? I think you could have made a very strong case that Biden entering that debate had a better chance to win the presidency than another Democrat thrown in. And I think that may have been true. I would have slightly leaned that way as well. There's no chance you can make that argument anymore. I mean, the betting markets still only have Trump about 60%. Why is that? Because they know well, we all know he is incredibly unpopular. His personal approval ratings are nearly what Biden's are. He did not perform exceptionally in that debate by any means. He has a ton of baggage, although a little less so with his recent court wins, but still, everybody knows how beatable he is. That's why his odds are only 60% and not 90 right now. And if a Democrat wins who could emerge and be a strong candidate, I think you have a 40% chance, maybe more if that Democrat performs well. With Biden, I think you will see after the polling comes in, and it's starting to come in now, I think you'll see Biden settle in as about a 80-20 underdog. Still a chance because Trump is Trump. But I'll tell you, there's a huge difference between, I'm no math major, between a 20% chance and a 40% chance. A massive difference. And look, I don't think there was any coming back from that debate, no matter what happened. But if there was a chance, it would have been over these last 6 days since the debate, Biden coming out and giving unscripted events, meaning interviews and a press conference. Not a press conference next week, which is what they're saying when NATO's here. No, I would have come out. If you want to take the weekend, fine. I know he had the Camp David thing with his family. He had a fundraiser, fine. But starting Monday, I would have come back to the White House Monday morning and been like, here we go. Hour and a half press conference. Ask me anything. I would have sat down for interviews, not just with ABC and NBC and CBS. I would have sat with somebody at Fox News, a host there, like maybe Neil Cavuto. I would have sat with maybe, I don't know, Joe Rogan, go on a podcast, do non-traditional media. I would have spent Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday saying, this was a fluke. Here I am. Judge me now. I had a cold. I had jet lag. I was over-prepared, whatever, right? But now here I
Over-prepared.
am. Yeah, I was over-prepared. I studied, because people have used that.
Too much studying.
Another one of these parade of excuses. But here I am now. Let's go. The fact that they didn't do that, which again, I think that was their only chance to salvage the debate. The fact they didn't do that, I think speaks volumes.
And I don't know if you heard though, Eric, this thing could all turn around for Biden because Hunter is actually helping him now, and he's in there in these meetings. When you read something like that too, and look, Hunter, we all know about Hunter, and I feel bad for folks that had addictions, although it seems like he was enjoying himself pretty much in some of these pictures and videos back in the day. Looked like a fun guy to party with maybe 20 years ago. But it's just hilarious. I'm sorry. When you read headlines and it's like, "Oh, Hunter is now with Joe, helping him through this because he's loyal." And if there's anybody that you don't want to be attached to, I know he's his son, but it's comical. "Oh, don't worry guys, Hunter's got this. Eric, Hunter will take care of this. Don't worry."
Yeah, look, the wheels are clearly coming off. I mean, we know this. The debate finger pointing, the family was blaming the makeup, which, yes, the makeup was bad. Okay. But this wasn't about the bad makeup. This wasn't about him looking at the wrong camera. This wasn't about the fact that he had a cold and his voice was raspy. This wasn't about the debate moderators not fact checking Trump. This wasn't about him having 2 long foreign trips right before. All that stuff could be true, and he still could have just done okay, right?
Mhm.
If he would have just done okay, that would have been enough, exceeding expectations. We probably wouldn't even having this discussion now. But here's the thing. Data matters, and the polling is starting to come in, and you can't spin that. You can try to spin a bad debate performance. But now the results are coming in. New York Times, Siena just came out today, right as we're recording this. That's one of the best polling agencies in terms of their recent track record. It's one of the highest rated. They have Trump up 49-43, Trump by 6. CNN had a poll the other day. That's the exact same result. Now, to be fair, there have been other post-debate polls where it's been much closer. Yahoo had it Trump by 2, CBS News Trump by 2, Reuters had them tied, Morning Consult Trump by 1. So the polling is not universally disastrous for Biden. Oh, after the debate. It's actually not as bad as I thought it would be at this point. But as this New York Times poll shows, it's trending in a bad direction. But a couple points. The average now has him down by 2.5. That's probably going to get worse. And as we've talked about before, he needs to win by probably 2 or 3 points to win the Electoral College, which is all that matters because Trump has an advantage in the Electoral College. So if you're really down by, let's say, 5 at the end of the week, 4 or 5, you're really down 6 or 7 because you've got to win by 2. And I don't think there's any chance that people think he could make up that deficit between now and the election, given what we've seen from him, not just during the debate, which was the most troubling, but as I said, not doing the things he needs to do in the days after, the obvious things to counteract that perception that this was just one bad night, which means either one of two things: either they are incompetent, which isn't good, or they know it, but they don't trust him to do it. And maybe a combination of both. And that gives me zero confidence that it's going to work. And I just saw the odds now of him dropping out are up to 75%, the betting odds. So
Ooh.
that kind of tells you where we are. It was 50-50 just a few days ago. So it's jumped up a lot in the last 24 hours.
One thing I also have really picked up on, and I already knew this. We talked about this. Everybody's known for years that Trump had that base. He has this base of about 35% that never go anywhere. No matter what. 35% are sticking with Donald Trump, and you can joke around about, "Hey, I can go out to Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and people will still vote for me." So, I guess I never thought the percentage was as high on the Democrat side, but I think it is now that I'm kind of watching everything that's taken place. Everybody saw that CNN poll that said who won the debate, and 67% said Trump and 33%. So, I mean, 33% of people watched that debate and thought Joe Biden won. Now, did they really think that? Or are they just saying, hey, I'm going to vote Democrat no matter what? So, my point is, if you round up to 35 and you kind of acknowledge that Trump always has that 35% that's going to be with him, win, lose, or draw, I think it's kind of fair to say it's going to be the 30% in the middle that determine what happens here. But it is kind of sad too that there's that large of a percent, and whatever the real number is, 30, 32, I don't know. But if you just kind of approximate, it is pretty sad that 35% on each side are just team ideology, no matter what.
Oh, I think it's more than that. Yeah, I think if you include the people who really lean hard one way or the other, I think it's more
Sure.
like 40% on each side.
Probably, yeah.
And I think, look, that what Biden did on Thursday, that is the political equivalent of Trump's "I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and still win." Like, that's the political version of that, because it literally couldn't be worse. And yet, as I point out in these polls, yes, he's losing. Yes, he's lost ground, but even in this New York Times Siena poll, he's getting 43% of likely voters. So that's the floor, probably, for any major party nominee. We live in incredibly polarized times. It's reinforced, as you and I have talked about, by social media and the algorithms, and it's more about my tribe and my team than it is about the policy, certainly, but even the candidates. And that's why I've said before, I used to think that that Biden and Trump were both so uniquely unpopular because of their baggage. Biden's age mainly, and Trump's just Trump being Trump. But I'm beginning to doubt that, was because of the things you mentioned and because of the polling. And what I mean by that isn't like, I could imagine someone subbed in for Biden or Trump who would win fairly easily. Like, for instance, I think if Nikki Haley won the Republican nomination, even prior to the debate debacle, I think she would have been a huge favorite to beat Biden, even if Biden didn't have that debate performance. And I think on the other side, you could probably imagine somebody like, I don't know, Michelle Obama, who could drop it. I mean, there was a Reuters Ipsos poll, and it asked Trump versus all these theoretical Democrats. Trump was even or ahead of everyone except Michelle Obama, who beat him 50-39. By the way, I saw a report today. Michelle Obama said she's not going to run, which I never really thought she was. But my point when I mentioned Nikki Haley's and Michelle Obama is, I think they're the exceptions that prove my role. What I mean by that is, they're people who I don't think could get their nomination. Like, the only reason Nikki Haley finished second is because Trump was there, and a lot of her vote was people who didn't want Trump, and she was the only
Mhm.
person standing at the end. If you imagine a world where we go back a year from now and Donald Trump says, "I'm not going to run. I want to spend time with my family and win club championships and spend time with Melania, who hates me, and my kids, and who I don't really like." But like, if Trump had said that, I don't think Nikki Haley wins the nomination. I think Ron DeSantis most likely would have been the overwhelming favorite to win. So the fact that Haley finished second is kind of a fluke. I don't think she could win the nomination. And I don't think Michelle Obama could win a nomination because we don't know what her political skills are. We don't. I mean, I don't. Maybe she could, but she's not up to that. She's not going to. Doesn't even want it. So what I'm saying is, people who could win the nomination of either party, I think, would get us back to a result of what we saw roughly heading into Thursday's debate, which is 50-50. That's the world we live in. It's about team and tribe and the other side. Like, you're already seeing it with Kamala Harris. Conservatives, or if you follow social media, you're already seeing some videos going around. Like, they're already ramping up the attack machine on Kamala Harris. And if she's the nominee, if Biden bows out and hands it to her, it's going to go full throttle. And it would be the same way if Trump had a health emergency and the Republicans pick Ron DeSantis at their convention in 2 weeks. It would be the same thing. And so I think that's kind of just the world we live in. Yes, Biden and Trump both have unique things that make them particularly unpopular, but I think any candidate that could win the nomination of either party would be in a similar position to Trump or Biden after 2-3 months. By the way, that's an argument to toss Biden, because that's an argument that the generic Democrats start you pretty close to even, maybe slightly behind.
Okay, let's play this out. If it's Kamala, and I don't want it to be Kamala, but if it is, you can't have your president and VP from the same state. So you couldn't have Gavin Newsom as your VP. I kind of like the idea of Gavin Newsom as the attack dog VP. You know what I'm saying? So then you think about other candidates. I mean, would you do the all female ticket of Kamala with Gretchen Whitmer? And just so everybody knows, I don't think Kamala is the best choice. So I'm going to throw this to you, but I like Gretchen Whitmer on the top of the ticket because Michigan, Midwest, everybody knows they need Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. She has less baggage. You know, most people on the right, the only thing they know of her is that there was this quasi fake kidnapping plot, which I don't believe was her fault, to be honest with you. I don't think she's the one that started the plot. But I don't know. I like Whitmer on the top of the ticket, and I like Gavin Newsom as the attack dog VP, because if Newsom's at the top of the ticket, he has all of his baggage from California.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want Kamala Harris to run. I don't think she's the best option. And I'm not one of these people that says, oh, she has to run. She's next in line. She's a woman of color. They're going to lose all women of color votes. I'm sorry. I think if you're a Democrat, you want to win, and you're going to go with whoever you think gives you the best chance to win.
Yeah. First, a quick thing on the states. You are right. The Constitution says that you can't win the electoral votes of that state, but you can get around that. And Republicans have talked about that with Marco Rubio, because he's been a rumored VP candidate for Trump. What you could do is just establish residency in another state. Dick Cheney did this when he was living in Texas with George W. Bush. He moved to Wyoming. Like South Dakota, you just have to have basically like a P.O. box and spend a day there. So to establish residency. So you could do it. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's a workaround if you had to.
Sure.
But I think the bigger problem would be Democrats already seen as a coastal elitist party, and now they're going to have two people on their ticket, both from California. But so here's what I think. Let me start with what I think they will do, because I've said I think Biden will step aside probably next week or the week after. I think the odds on favorite are that it's Harris for several reasons. First of all, time is an issue, as we've talked about, especially with that Ohio ballot deadline, and also the money. The Biden campaign is sitting on over $200 million. I think it's $240 million. If Biden doesn't run, but Harris does, Harris can use that money because she is on the ticket that has raised that money. But if it's a new nominee, then it becomes complicated. They can't just give that money to the new nominee. They would have to set up a political action committee with that money, and then that company could be that money could then be used as if it's an outside group. But there are rules with that. An outside group can't coordinate with the campaign. So you would essentially have the, let's say, Whitmer Newsom campaign raising money, and then you would have this massive $240 million trust fund that would be an outside group that couldn't coordinate with the Whitmer Newsom campaign. So that's an issue. But to me, that should not stop you from doing what I think So I think it would probably be Harris. But what would I do? I would roll the dice and let it play out over the next 4 or 5 weeks. Let these candidates and prospective candidates make their case to the delegates who ultimately decide and to the American public. Let them do interviews, let them have debates, run ads if they can, have a debate or two. And then if Harris earns it through that process, that's better for her because she has not shown yet that she can do that. I've talked before on the show and I've said I think Harris has gotten better. I think she has improved over these 3.5 years. I thought she handled herself pretty well on CNN after the debate in a really tough spot, coming on trying to defend that shit show. And so I think maybe she could do it. But she was a disaster in 2000 when she ran a presidential campaign that flamed out early. And I think if she is the nominee, it should be because she earned it. So I would throw it open. I think whoever emerges from that contest would give you your best chance because of what I said earlier. A primary is a proving ground for candidates, but it also, as I said, makes it harder for certain candidates like a Nikki Haley on the Republican side to win. This is an opportunity where maybe you could get a nominee who might not be great at running a primary campaign, but might be a better general election campaign. Now, maybe not, because these delegates are super partisan, a lot of them, and pretty left wing. And so maybe you couldn't, but at least it's possible. It's in play that you could get a nominee who might be a better general election candidate, which is all we care about right now because we're 4 months to go, than a primary candidate. I've said before, I really like Big Gretchen Whitmer. I think
Big
I
Gretch.
think that's what they called her in a hip. There's a hip hop song that was dedicated to her called Big Gretch. She knows how to win in the ultimate toss up state. She did it twice, including in a not great year for Democrats in 2022. She helped flip both chambers of the Michigan legislature to her side. She's not some left wing, who knows what would happen when she became a national figure. So I think she's a female, which obviously matters to some degree. And as I've said, Michigan may be the key state to winning the whole thing. So it doesn't hurt. I'm not saying she should be the nominee because she's from Michigan. I'm just saying it doesn't hurt. And I would say the same thing about Josh Shapiro, who I think the Whitmer Shapiro ticket would be my ticket. He's from Pennsylvania. Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania have voted Democrat together in 7 of the last 8 presidential elections. And the only one they didn't was when Trump flipped them all in 2016. They vote together, and it's not a coincidence they vote together. Demographically, they're fairly similar, Midwestern, maybe Mid-Atlantic in the case of Pennsylvania states. If you have the sitting governors of those 2 states, I think it gives you your best chance to win. Because if Democrats win those 3 states, they probably win the election. But that said, I would let the process play out. And maybe Newsom just wows everybody. It's possible. Do I think he'd be the strongest candidate given his baggage in California? I don't. But maybe he comes on and he's a dynamo and you're like, this is the guy. Like, this guy's a star. Let's go. Maybe that happens. Maybe Harris shows that she has improved her political skills and she comes out there and looks great. And so it becomes obvious that it's her. That is the process I would like to see play out. But what I don't want to see, but unfortunately I think we will see, is the Democratic Party revert back to its obsession with race and gender and say the argument that you just laid out, that you cannot take this away from a black woman who could be not only our first female president, but our first black female president. You cannot do that. It would tear the party apart. I don't think that would happen. I think the hate of Donald Trump is so high among Democrats that if a Democrat clearly earned it over her, I think even those Democrats upset would ultimately likely come home. But you've got to go with your best person. Don't give me this identity politics bullshit that is one of the reasons the Democrats are in the position they are in right now. Because a lot of people look at Trump and they think he's crazy. But then they look at the Democrats and they think, you guys are obsessed with weird stuff that isn't really as important in 2024. And so, yeah, I don't like Trump, but you're kind of weird too. And I get that because kind of where I am. And so don't do that. Be different. Be different. Don't give me this tribalism. We have to go with our person because they represent our identity. I mean, we've got to defend them no matter what. The Republican Party under Trump has lost its way. And it has become less of a political party and more of a borderline cultish movement of this man. That's what the modern day Republican Party is. They refuse to criticize him for pretty much anything. Or if they do, they're essentially kicked out of the party, like Liz Cheney and Paul Ryan. And so at least I thought, you know what? I don't love the far left of the party of the Democrats, but they're not really running the show. And the Democrats in 2020, think about what they did. They didn't love Joe Biden. He was like the fifth choice, but they looked around and said, you know what? We've got to be responsible. And I'm talking about voters, elites, everybody. They came together and said, we have to beat Trump. Who's the best person to do that? It's Joe Biden. He was the vice president. At that time, he was still, fairly with it. He ran a pretty decent campaign. He looked fine on the debate stage. Doesn't have a record of being Bernie or Elizabeth Warren and crazy left policies. Let's come together and make the sensible choice. And it worked. It was the right move. It paid off and they won. And I thought, well, at least we still have one political party, even though I don't agree with them on everything, that are the adults in the room, that look around and say, you know what? We've got to try to do what's right and responsible to win. Here is your chance again. This is another 2020 primary moment. If you really believe Donald Trump is the threat you say he is, and you really want to maximize your chances of winning, you don't go with an 81-year-old who just turned in the most disastrous debate performance in the history of presidential debates and isn't going to get any better and wants to be president until he's 86. And you also don't go with his vice president just because, or mainly because, she is a black woman. That's not what you do if you're the adults in the room. That's not what you do if you really care about democracy. You go with the best person, or in this case, the best ticket you have. And if that's Kamala Harris at the end of the process, fine, it's Kamala Harris. But if it's not, then you turn the page and you do what you have to do for the country.
Couple things. First of all, you said the next 4 months here. So you have July, August, September, October before the election. And I think what would happen is what you described with Gavin Newsom. Even if you don't think Gavin Newsom is the best person to run the country, I think he's the best at running for president. If they actually had kind of a jump ball over the next 4 months, I just think Gavin Newsom is such a skilled politician and orator, and he can go into hostile territory in interviews and come across looking strong and confident, even if half the things he says aren't true. He's just slick, man. He's really good at his job. And it's also funny because you're describing, you were saying, over the next 4 months, they should do debates and interviews. And I'm thinking, oh, that sounds like a primary, which is really what I think everybody wanted, right? I mean, look, even if you think Joe Biden did a decent job over the last 4 years, and I think he did a decent job overall, inheriting a lot of crap with COVID. He was bad on the border. There's other things. He's not perfect, but I do think he inherited just a load of crap economically, both domestically and internationally, with COVID and everything going wrong. It's funny to me because now we're maybe going to have a 4-month primary where everybody kind
A
of wanted just
4-week
normal
primary. Yeah.
4 week or 4
For
month,
a week.
whatever it is. Yes, before the convention, obviously. But what I'm saying is, it just made more sense to do this the old fashioned way. And as you said, then Kamala would have had a fair shot, and Big Gretch would have had a fair shot. And if Shapiro wanted to jump in, hell, if Bernie wanted to run again, even if Hillary, I'm not saying she should have, if any of these people wanted a real shot, they could have had it in a fair fight. And that's another spot where Democrats deserve this criticism, is it now feels like a rigged game. It feels like they always wanted to push Joe Biden towards the finish line and then replace him out right before the end of the race. It does look like that. Whereas myself, but I think everybody would have thought it was more fair. At least the Republicans had a fair primary. I know Donald Trump didn't show up at the debates, but that's because he had such a crazy big lead. He didn't have to. At least it was a fair fight. Even if Donald Trump didn't show up to the debates, which he didn't, folks still could have voted for DeSantis. They could have voted for Nikki Haley. They didn't, but Democrats never gave their voting bloc that chance. And that is unfair. It feels very undemocratic.
Well, yeah, and look, in hindsight, obviously, it's clear now that would have been the move. Again, it's not a guarantee. Like that's the thing when I hear some of these arguments. None of this is a guarantee. You don't have great options. In many ways, you're picking because I'm not here telling you, and I've always said this when I've talked about an open convention. I'm not saying that's a great play. That's not what I'm saying. It's not. It is not a great play. It is like you're behind with with 5 minutes to go in an NFL game by 2 touchdowns and you just start throwing the ball and hope for an onside kick. Like that, but that's where we are. It's not a question of is it a great play? It's a question of is it a better play than what you have? And I think the answer now is obviously yes. But you're right. And if you were just saying in hindsight, what should they have done? Yeah, they should have had an open primary. That would have given them, I think, again, Trump may still have won, but it would have given them a better shot. And that's on a lot of people. I mean, it starts obviously with Joe Biden. Like you're the guy. And if you feel yourself deteriorating in any way, you have to make that decision for the good of the people. It's on his family, it's on his advisors, White House staff, other elected Democrats, if they knew. I'm not sure how there's been a lot of reporting now. Now, you didn't see a lot of reporting about this in mainstream outlets. Now you're seeing it. In the New York Times, there was an article the other day that, during his debate prep, they didn't start till 11 and he took an afternoon nap every day. And that people have seen this over the last 6 months. Carl Bernstein was saying that he's heard over the last 6 to 12 months, people have seen incidents maybe not as bad as the debate, but similar to the debate. So you're starting to see these articles now come out, and who knows how much of that is true and how much is cover your own ass. But after Thursday, I tend to believe it. So my point is, other people probably saw this and didn't step up. So some of the blame is on them. And then we have system issues. The parties are too powerful. Our primary system is not great because it makes it even if anyone wanted to challenge Biden, it would have been incredibly difficult. And the way we set up our system really puts a tremendous amount of power and decision making on the people who are the favorites, Biden and Trump in this case. And they basically get to decide. And I think that's a system that allows too much power in the hands of a couple of people. I would like to see a system where we had ranked choice voting, where we had primaries that were structured in a different way that allowed maybe more competition. I think that would be more healthy for our democracy. But that's a different conversation for a different day. We are where we are.
All right, let's end on this. I have a bit of a heart out, but we can get into this a little bit here. The Trump immunity deal. What's an official act? What's an unofficial act? And I also, if we're going to make the comparison to Biden, where everyone should now obviously realize that Biden is too old to run and that he's deteriorating. I would hope that most reasonable people also look at the Trump immunity thing and think, we've had a country for 250 years and we never needed rulings like this for presidents, right? Now, people on the right will say, oh, that's because we've never had lawfare. We never had people go after a president like this. But really, I'm talking to the whatever that percentage is in the middle, 20%, 30%. I'm talking to the people in the middle, or maybe trying to convince anyone. Like, you don't think it's odd that we've been a country for 250 years and we never needed the Supreme Court to basically say essentially a president can do almost anything? I mean, that's absurd. But you know what? It's 4th of July tomorrow. So let's celebrate that, Eric. What do you think? Let's celebrate the fact that a
God,
president can do anything.
God bless America. Yeah, look, you could make the argument we've never needed it before because people didn't go after a former president, or you could make the argument, which I think is much more convincing, that a former president has never done the things that Donald Trump did. I mean, that's clearly the right answer. Look, I've read some of the Supreme Court ruling and I've read some takes on it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, act like I just read a few articles and now I'm some constitutional law expert. But my general take is I understand the broad point Roberts is making, which in the majority, the Chief Justice, which is we're writing as Neil Gorsuch said during the debate, we're writing a rule of the ages. This isn't so much about Donald Trump. And I agree that presidents should enjoy some immunity. I do agree with that. I think Roberts went a little bit too far. And in particular, I think Amy Coney Barrett, who voted with the majority but wrote a concurrence, her basic point, which is kind of what I agree with, which is I think the majority went a little bit too far. And also on Trump specifically, it's clear that some of his conduct is not covered by the immunity. For instance, pressuring the Arizona legislature, some of the fake elector stuff. It's clear that is not covered by what
Mhm.
John Roberts laid out. So therefore, that the Supreme Court should have and could have allowed that part of the case to go forward. But instead, they sent the whole thing back down to the lower court, which means what's going to happen, most likely, is the lower court is going and the prosecutor, Jack Smith, are going to they're going to change these charges to make them a little bit less severe, slightly different. But at the end of the day, a large chunk of that case is still going to be able to be brought. But of course, that will all happen now after Election Day. And so the American people will not get to see this trial, which I think is kind of a big deal, but prior to Election Day. That's going to be the practical impact of this. But on a larger point, I think what this case reaffirms is that a president has incredible power under our system and faces very little accountability, legally or politically, because that's how this should have been handled, is politically. The political branches of government should have come together and said, this conduct after the election up through January 6th was just reprehensible and this guy should be impeached. House did impeach him, Senate didn't convict, because the Senate's never going to convict any president anymore of impeachment because you need 67 votes. It's not going to happen. 40% of people are still think, Biden won the debate. Like, we live in a time now where legally, practically, politically, a president is going to have almost no accountability. That's why the decision of who the president is so important, because ultimately the accountability lies with us. That's it. At the end of the day, we are the accountability, right? I mean, it's July 4th. What did Lincoln say at the Gettysburg Address? Of the people, by the people, for the people. That is at the end of the day us. And that Supreme Court decision just gets us right back to that point. If we choose to put people in that office who will abuse that power in ways similar to what we saw with Donald Trump do, then, at the end of the day, what John Roberts is telling us is nobody's going to protect you. Nobody's going to save you. The law's not going to do it. Congress isn't going to do it. You get what you deserve.
And then you can also, I think, I'll end on this. You can also simplify it with, look, everybody doesn't read all of this text and all these briefings. If you play it out through the media, it feels like another win for Trump. You know what I'm saying? It feels like a
Absolutely.
win through the media, through the electorate for Donald Trump. All right. We got to go. Everybody settle down. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe, share the channel on social media, put it in your group text. Let's keep this thing growing. We had our best month ever in June, Eric, and hopefully we'll have our best month ever here in July, because there could be some craziness coming up if they switch Biden out, which they should. We shall see. Happy 4th of July, everybody.